Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the President and CEO of the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce, Shannon Full.
All right, good morning, everyone. Okay, we need a lot more coffee in this audience. So good morning, everyone. All right, I'm Shannon Full, President of the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber, and I'm honored to welcome you here to this year's Midwest Economic Summit. Today is about big ideas. We are standing at a pivotal moment, not just here in the Midwest, but across the country. Our economy is shifting industries. Industries are evolving at breakneck speed. The workforce landscape is transforming right before our eyes. And with a new administration, the policies, priorities, and opportunities are all in flux. So the big question is, are we going to sit back and react, or are we going to lead? Here in the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Metro, we've already made our choice. We are leading. Our Innovate 28 initiative is an ambitious, forward-thinking initiative designed to fuel innovation, drive economic growth, and ensure that we aren't just keeping up, but we are the ones setting the pace. Think about this. By 2028, where do we want to be? I want us to be standing as a national model for workforce solutions, business expansion, and economic competitiveness. That's what today's conversation is all about. We've gathered the top economic experts to break down the trends, discuss what's ahead, and most importantly, figure out how we can work together to turn challenges into opportunities. So thanks to the support of our incredible sponsors, we're able to have conversations that don't just inform, but that drive innovation, collaboration, and action. So let's get started. Buckle up, because we're going to see firsthand the economic forces that are shaping our region and what they mean for our businesses. Thank you to our premier sponsors, Bremer Bank and Cass County Electric Cooperative, for actively investing in the successes of our region, both for our businesses and our community as a whole. I'd also like to thank today's gold sponsor, NextEra Energy. And of course, I extend my heartfelt thanks to our media sponsors, Inforum and MWC Advertising of Fargo-Moorhead. Your support plays a crucial role in amplifying our message to reach a wider audience. Inforum is broadcasting this summit on 20 of their news sites across Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota, providing real-time coverage and bringing in important conversations that are happening here to people throughout the Midwest. MWC promotes each summit across its many leading stations and hosts on-air conversations with our expert speakers, panelists, and major sponsors. Thank you both to Inforum and MWC for your partnership and for helping us share these important economic updates for those attending virtually. I'd also like to thank our silver sponsors, AM 1100 The Flag and WDAY, Fargo Inc., First International Bank and Trust, Heartland Trust Company, Marvin, Minnesota State University Moorhead, North Dakota State College of Science, Prairie Business Magazine, Pro Resources, Sanford Health, and Western State Bank. And our corporate sponsors, who you can see listed on the screens, give you all the access to today's insights. Additionally, I'd like to thank Kent and the team at Livewire for all their work that they do to make this an exceptional production. It truly is top of the line. Dennis Kroll with 5'20" Design Lounge. You'll see him snapping your fabulous photos as he walks through the audience today. And our venue sponsor for today's event is the Red River Valley Fair Association. Cody, you and your team really do a fabulous job providing us this space. Another key factor that makes the Midwest Summit Series so impactful is the power of collaboration. So in addition to the Inforum news sites, this year, 31 chambers and associations from across Minnesota, Missouri, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin are live streaming today's events in their own communities. This truly is remarkable to think about 31 other organizations that believe strongly in collaboration. You can see our incredible co-hosts on the screen now. Thank you all for your partnership and commitment to driving progress here in the Midwest. Thank you to all of our sponsors and co-hosts for your support of this important event. Your dedication to fostering economic growth makes events like this possible, and we are truly grateful. Let's give all of our co-hosts and sponsors a round of applause. So the first part of our event today, we're going to hear from economic leaders who can break down some of the landscape in North Dakota and Minnesota. So unfortunately, due to the timing of the event and the legislative session, the state of Minnesota was not able to send anyone to represent them today, but they did send us a brief video to highlight some key insights looking into Minnesota's economy. Following the video, I will have the opportunity to sit down with Rich Garman from the North Dakota Department of Commerce for a moderated conversation as we dive into North Dakota's current landscape. Now, please turn your attention to the screens for a short video from Neela Molgaard, Director of the Office of Small Business Partnerships for the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development.
Hello, everyone. I'm Neela Molgaard, the Executive Director of DEED's Office of Small Business and Innovation. On behalf of Commissioner Varilek and the entire DEED team, I'm excited to connect with you today to talk about Minnesota's economy. I'm sorry we aren't able to be there in person, especially because I'm proud to share our economy has real momentum, and we're looking forward to working with all of you to keep that going. For instance, our labor market is having a particularly strong moment. Minnesota has added jobs 10 of the last 12 months, totaling nearly 37,500 in the last year. Our unemployment rate is 3.3%, lower than the national rate of 4.1%. We have a strong workforce. These job figures are carried by one of the nation's most active labor markets. Our labor force participation rate is 67.8%, more than 5 percentage points higher than the United States. The news is even better locally. Job growth in the Fargo-Moorhead MSA is up 1.6% over the year, outpacing the state as a whole. Beyond jobs, we know that much of the economic narrative in the last couple of years was about rising prices. In other words, inflation that was outpacing wage increases and therefore eroding the purchasing power for workers and families. Minnesota has turned down that corner. Average hourly private sector earnings are up 5.4% over the year, more than the rate of inflation, and much faster than as the nation as whole. The good news for these workers is that we have a lot of new expanding businesses looking for employees. In 2024, 67,500 new businesses were formed. That's nearly 50% increase over 5 years ago. And businesses that form in Minnesota stay in Minnesota. We have a high survival rate. We're ranked 10th nationally for business survival rate, with 54.2% of businesses formed in 2019 still surviving in 2024. It's no wonder the U.S. News World Reports ranks Minnesota 4th best state for business, and CNBC ranks us 6th. And not only are businesses surviving and expanding, but they're finding a place for the products in a global marketplace. Through the first 9 months of 24, Minnesota exports grew nearly 10% over the same time period in 2023, compared to 3% nationally. As you can see, our economy has momentum. We're proud to have played a significant role in this alongside you and so many partners. So next, I'd like to go a little bit deeper into the details about DEED's work and our agenda for the year ahead. First, we continue to invest in business expansion. Last fiscal year, our core business development programs helped leverage nearly $1.5 billion in outside investment at business expansions around Minnesota. These awards helped create 2,000 new jobs, and we're set to shatter that mark this year. So far, the first 6 months of fiscal year 25, our business expansion programs have helped create more than 1,800 new jobs. Deed is helping power this growth. One way is through our Minnesota Forward Fund, which has helped 3 companies, Polar Semiconductor and Skywater Technology in Bloomington and Solugen in Marshall, secure massive federal investments and create hundreds of jobs. Now we're asking the legislature to give Deed even more flexibility to the Forward Fund, allowing us to use our funding to support major business expansion, even if they are not pursuing a federal match. These companies are choosing to invest here, to grow their business here, and to create jobs here. It's because Minnesota is uniquely positioned to offer the skilled workforce, the spirit of ingenuity, high quality of life, and world-class infrastructure that businesses need to flourish. It is our agency's job to help these companies lay the foundation for growth, and we're doing that work every single day. But businesses alone are not what makes a healthy economic landscape. We're also making targeted workforce development investments to create structured pathways for workers to industries where employment is in high demand and offers family-sustaining wages for workers. As you know, Minnesota's tight labor market continues to be a significant challenge for the state, which is why we're working so hard to get more people into good jobs in important industries. Last year, we launched a brand new program, Drive for 5, designed to support 5 high-demand, high-paying industries: technology, caring professions, education, manufacturing, and the trades. Through Drive for 5, we're aligning workforce training efforts with business demands and creating partnerships between businesses, trade associations, and workforce development training programs to connect people to good jobs. Last year, our grantees served an initial 1,200 people. To build on the success of the program, we're asking the legislature for $16 million for the program during the next biennium, helping us serve hundreds more Minnesotans looking for good jobs and businesses looking to hire good people. One of the best ways to loosen up our tight labor market is to get more people off the sidelines. We'll keep working to help more Minnesotans join our labor pool and get good jobs. I want to thank you all for having me and for your continued commitment to helping businesses succeed in your region and beyond. We are greatly appreciative of the partnership and the opportunity to speak with you. I hope today's summit is informative and instructive as we work together to support businesses and grow jobs across Minnesota. Thank you so much.
So now we're going to take a moment and jump across the river in North Dakota. Please help me welcome, joining us for the conversation today is Rich Garman, Director of Economic Development and Finance for the North Dakota Department of Commerce. Let's give him a warm welcome. While Rich gets settled in, I'm going to give just a couple more pieces of housekeeping for you. If your table runs, this is an important one. If your table runs out of coffee, there is coffee on the back in the back as well. So please make yourself at home. Come and go as you please, and we'll jump right into the conversation today. So thank you for joining us today. We're glad to have you here, Rich.
Thanks for having me.
So for those that don't know, Rich spearheads economic diversification, business expansion, and strategic growth here in North Dakota. So leveraging decades of experience in project management, infrastructure development, and strategic investment, Rich's expertise makes him a key voice in today's conversation. But before we dive into the conversation, just one more piece for all of you. We want you all to be a part of the conversation. So whether you're watching us virtually or here in the audience, we've got a couple ways for you to do that. First, you can scan the QR code at your table or on the screens. Or for those online, you can visit chamberquestions.com to submit your questions. We really do. We've got some great prepared questions, but we want this to be all about you and the questions that you have. So if you've got particular questions, please send them on up to us and we'll address them as we can. So let's get it kicked off. Rich, can you start a little bit with just a little bit more about your role and your background?
Sure. Thank you. I'm not a native North Dakotan, so don't hold that against me, but I married one. So
That counts.
that's how I got back to North Dakota. I spent 30 years in the electric utility industry. I spent 15 years down in Wyoming and Utah and Oregon and Washington State while working for a big utility out west. And in 2007, I came home from work. Wasn't loving my job at the time. We were living in Wyoming. And my wife, the native North Dakotan, asked me if I had ever heard of this company in Bismarck. And I'm like, no, I haven't. And she goes, well, you're applying for a job there. So 4 months later, we were packing and heading for Bismarck. So we live in Mandan, North Dakota now. We've lived there since 2007. We moved back. I grew up, to be fair, I grew up in eastern Montana. I was 10 miles from the border, so it wasn't that far away. We used to sneak across the border all the time and buy fireworks that were legal in North Dakota. We'd bring them back to Sydney. So. But that's how I got back to North Dakota. I spent 15 years in Wyoming and west of there and working for utility. Then I spent 15 years working for a cooperative utility here in the state of North Dakota. A few years ago, in 2021, I had the opportunity to take a buyout from that particular utility. And lo and behold, there was an opportunity with the state of North Dakota working in economic development. While working for the utility in North Dakota, I had focused in business development and economic development the latter part of my career there. And so it was a natural fit to step over into economic development in North Dakota. For the state of North Dakota. I've been in the Department of Commerce in economic development and finance for about almost 3.5 years now. It's the best job I've ever had. I love doing what I'm doing. My job is to tell people how amazing and how great North Dakota is. That's my full-time job. If anybody can match that, let's compare notes, because it's a great job. I love doing what I'm doing. And there's so much opportunity in North Dakota right now. There's so much to talk about, so many good points to sell. I just can't keep going. I can go on and on about that for hours, but I suppose we should probably answer a few questions.
Well, yeah, let's jump into it. I will say this chamber gig is pretty good too, so I might have you.
All right.
But let's talk a little bit. Give us a little bit, especially for those that are watching online or maybe aren't as familiar with the North Dakota landscape. Talk a little bit about the economy here in North Dakota in general, and then we'll get into some of the sectors.
Sure. I think anybody that has a pulse understands the economy in North Dakota is booming. It's moving fast forward all the time. Even in the worst of times, North Dakota seems to be doing better than anywhere else in the nation. Because we're diversified in the things that we do, we're resilient. Back in the utility industry, we used to talk about all of the above. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that meant all of the above as long as mine was in that list, but all of the above in everything we do in North Dakota, we're willing to try everything and anything to make sure that we can keep moving forward. To steal words from the governor, I think the state of the economy is strong. I think I plagiarized that from the governor's State of the Union address, or State of the State address, I think. But I think he plagiarized it from previous governors. But the state of the state is so strong. I used to believe that I had to go out and really sell North Dakota. Mm-hmm. That's not so much the case anymore. The secret's out. North Dakota, people are knocking on our doors at a very rapid pace. The biggest reason they're knocking on our door is our availability of energy. Mm-hmm. Energy is what's driving so much of the economic development right now. So that's the key driver right now in economic development is energy development. We've got a long ways to go, but we've got a lot of opportunity in in energy development.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about energy and power and as a, kind of the focus on that. We know that a lot of the national security is tied to energy production. What are you seeing as some of the most opportunistic aspects of the energy sector for here in North Dakota?
Yes, thanks. Bottom line is North Dakota has I know this is not a fair term, almost an infinite supply of natural gas. Now, that's obviously not true. But we have an amazingly large supply of natural gas in the state, and it's growing every day. And that's based on our oil production. The oil production, as it matures in the state, there's more natural gas that comes up out of every well for every barrel of oil that comes up. It's a great problem to have right now, but we're at a point now where that natural gas has just about filled the lines exporting that natural gas from the state. They're nearly full. I don't have the statistical data on that handy, but let's just call them almost full. We are working hard to find projects that can utilize that energy. We have a lot of energy. We don't have a lot of electricity. We have quite a lot of electricity, but we need more electricity. Every business that's out there, every value-added ag project, every AI project, every data project needs lots of energy, and typically in the form of electricity. Mm-hmm. We've got that. We've got that in spades. And that's what is attracting most of the companies to the state right now, is our amazing amount of energy that we have available. The lift we have right now is to convert that into the right type of energy, or the appropriate type of energy for the project. Everybody's talking about data centers, AI, things like that right now. They need electricity. They need a lot of electricity. We can provide that, but we have to build out the infrastructure to get that done. And that infrastructure includes pipelines to move that gas from point A to point B, and it includes power generation sites.
So in addition to the power needs, you mentioned some of the industry sectors that we're hearing that have great growth and potential: AI, value-added ag. What can we be doing here in North Dakota to better position ourselves for those companies?
One of the greatest things we can do is to educate ourselves. One of the stumbling blocks that we come across often is lack of knowledge of a project. Before we make a decision on a project as a city leader or a county leader or a township leader or whatever, let's educate ourselves and understand what a data center really is, what a soybean processing plant really is, what it does. Ethanol, name the project. It doesn't matter what the project is. Let's really educate ourselves and understand what impacts they'll have on your community. They're going to have impacts. A lot of them are positive. Some of them are maybe not as positive, and just from a noise standpoint or for something else. But really educate yourself, and don't let fear or lack of understanding drive decision making. Understand it, educate ourselves on what's going on. Most of these projects that we're bringing in fact, all these projects we're bringing to the state are good for the economy of the state of North Dakota. Now, we have to place them in the right spots. I don't want to build some industrial facility on Main Street, downtown Fargo, but there is a place for those facilities to be built. Let's educate ourselves and have that knowledge before we make decisions on saying no. Let's not say no until we educate ourselves. We're not doing a lot of that right now, saying no, but there's enough of it to say let's eliminate that from our conversation by educating ourselves. So.
Yeah, I think that's so important, the education side of it. The other part that I noticed coming here 4 years ago was that we don't often tell our story real well in North Dakota. I know that's part of your job. It's part of many of our elected leaders are looking at how do we do that. So when you were thinking about attracting, when we talk about attraction both in the business sense that we want to bring new companies here to North Dakota, but let's also talk about the workforce component of it. There's no doubt that we have a workforce shortage just like everywhere else across the country. What is the state doing around workforce attraction, retention, development? Can you give us a little glimpse into the workforce lens?
A little. That's not my area of expertise, but I have full faith in the leadership that's trying to work that problem. Workforce development is actually a division within Commerce as well, led by Katie Ralston Howe. they have their hands full. There's a lot to do there, and there are several programs that are out there, and it's more than just workforce. Childcare is a workforce issue. Housing is a workforce issue. Quality of life in the communities is a workforce issue. You've got to have all those things in place to make it attractive for people to want to come live in North Dakota. And they're doing their level best, across Commerce. Also in Commerce is community development, which is the quality of life issues, making sure we have nice places to live. All of that together, from our side of the fence in economic development and finance, technology, automation. Automation used to be scary. Now it's sort of a godsend. Autonomy, sort of related to automation, but utilizing the best technology out there to get the job done. Letting the employees do the jobs that are the most necessary and maybe not the most mundane of jobs. Let's try to automate those and maybe take those out of the lineup so that we can focus on the jobs that are the most important to get the most of the work done. But it's so multifaceted, and you're right. We have a workforce deficit. You hear that every single time anybody picks up a microphone. It's a big problem that has many solutions being worked to try to make it work for the state.
Great. So when we think about the key drivers for economic development, when we're looking at business attraction, obviously, but there's a lot going on to cultivate businesses here, whether they be small businesses to second stage, or perhaps it's the entrepreneurial climate. Can you talk a little bit about some of those drivers that are driving business growth here in the region?
Sure. One of the biggest things that drives business growth, I think, in North Dakota is accessibility. And I don't know how to put that on a one-pager really, and I don't know how to bottle that, but it's accessibility to elected officials, to regulator officials. Is that a phrase? I'm not sure that's right. But it's accessibility. You joke about North Dakota is a small town with a really long Main Street. It truly is. Everybody knows everybody in the state, and that's either very, very good for a project or very, very bad for a project. If you make a mistake and you do bad things, people in Rugby and Wahpeton know it within a matter of hours. But if you do good things, that also gets out. And so accessibility is huge. That's a huge driver. And it's hard to explain that to people that have never had that before. When you talk to folks from other states, they don't have access to the Department of Environmental Quality and some other state. I won't pick on any states in particular, or water resources, or the governor's office, or the commerce commissioner, or whoever it is. They don't have access like that. We offer that in North Dakota. We also have, we've talked about it already, but we have energy for days, literally. We've got energy for that other states envy. We just have to work on how we get that energy in the right form for the right projects. There are several programs out there as well that help attract various levels of companies. There's various tax policy opportunities where you can be sales tax exempt on certain projects. There's property tax options that some property taxes can be waived at the local level. There's some granting programs, not a lot. There's several loan programs. One of the key ingredients that North Dakota has, too, that nobody else has, is their own state-run bank. That's unique, and when you tell people that, they almost don't believe you, and they don't understand what that means. But it takes away a lot of risk on a lot of projects, because the Bank of North Dakota, I won't speak for them, or I'll get in trouble for that, but they do step in on a lot of projects, and they may take on a little bit more risk and partner with other banks where they wouldn't have that opportunity in other states. So we kind of come at it from 10 different directions and offer those opportunities. So
yeah, that is a really unique feature and option with the Bank of North Dakota. I know some of the companies that we've talked about, just the ability to complement the traditional bank. We have a lot of banks in the audience today, so being able to complement some of that to share some of that risk, and that we also are seeing a new level of venture capital interest coming into the state. Can you talk a little bit about what that flexibility in financing allows for mainly small, startup or small businesses, and how important that is for us?
Sure, we have a couple of opportunities. I won't steal Cody's thunder. I'll let her talk about a lot of that, but just a little bit that we have within the Department of Commerce. My division is economic development and finance. The and finance part contains several opportunities, and one of the biggest ones is the North Dakota Development Fund. I don't know if I would qualify it or call it exactly a venture capital opportunity, but it sort of looks like one and acts like one. Well, they will take calculated risks on various projects, generally in this several $100,000 to several $1 million range, but they give opportunities to projects that may not be completely bankable at another bank. They may need to have some of that risk taken by an entity like the North Dakota Development Fund. There's also other funds out there that we have opportunities to use, LIFT, Legacy Investment for Technology, I think. I got that right. And a few others that offer early companies an opportunity to gain access to some cash up front so they can get moving forward. There's a few others. There's some outside of our department. In the ag world, there's APUC, APUC, and then AD, which are more geared towards agriculture. There's a couple that are also managed by the Industrial Commission, Renewable Energy Commission, or Council, and Clean Sustainable Energy Authority. Obviously, those are aimed at sort of the ag energy nexus. So there's a lot of opportunities to get access to funds for projects. So.
What's the best way, so when we have all of these different programs, I think about this as a small business owner, you're just trying to do your business every single day, right? What's the best way to find or figure out those programs? Because I know that's something I've been vocal with the state. We're in the middle of the legislative session right now. We need to make it easier for the business owners to understand what's available to them. What's the best way for a company to find out more about these programs?
Well, I'm going to have to lay a definition out first. Primary sector. What does primary sector mean? Primary sector has some certain bars that a company or a project has to get over. They're basically on bringing new wealth into the state. We want a certain amount of new wealth, and a certain percentage of that new wealth has to come in from out of state, because it's important to churn the dollars in the state, but it's also very important to bring in dollars from outside of the state. So my division works primarily with primary sector, but there are opportunities for non-primary sector companies as well. Those would maybe be less dollar value or less percentage of income coming from out of the state. So for the primary sector projects, I have a team of 6 individuals that all have various subject matter expertises that range from UAS technology to value-added ag, energy, manufacturing, and I'm leaving somebody out, I'm sure. But the very fastest way and the most North Dakota way is to work with one of those folks, and they will hold your hand from point A to point B to make sure that you understand all the programs that are available. We put together what's called an incentives package. We'll gather information on your project in particular, get some cash flow numbers, get some employment numbers, things like that, and put together a package for an individual company that's custom tailored to you. Now, if it's non-primary sector, we do have opportunities for them as well. Many of those right now would flow through community services, but that's also a division of commerce. So that's just across the hall, same office. So contacting us is the best way. And I think the term concierge level is what we would give them. We would give them that level of effort to help them through the process. So.
Great. So one of the audience questions, thank you. So send some more, that'd be great. But one of the audience questions coming in, can you talk a little bit about the regulatory and or tax environment in North Dakota?
Yes, I can. It's far more attractive than most states. I go back to the access. We have access to many of the regulatory agencies in the state, so we can bring these companies to the permitting agencies on day one. They can meet with the appropriate people on the first day that they come to the state. There's no surprises, there's no gotchas. If they need a water permit, an air permit, a solid waste permit, whatever it is, they have that opportunity to meet with the right people very early on in their project. So like I said, there's no gotchas at the last hour on the project. That's, again, I don't know how to market that other than to just tell people that, but most of them won't believe me because that's not the way most of the rest of the country operates. Another thing that we have in North Dakota is primacy. A lot of people don't understand what primacy is, but it really becomes apparent when we talk about carbon capture, use, and sequestration, CCUS. Basically capturing CO2 off the backside of either ethanol plants or power plants or other places. What do we do with that carbon dioxide after we capture it? We can utilize it. That's my goal. I want to use it all. We want to add value to everything. Or we can sequester it. We can push it underground and store it infinitely underground. There's only 3 states in the United States right now that have primacy, and one of those states is North Dakota. In fact, North Dakota was the first one. So us, Wyoming, and Louisiana are the only 3 states that have that primacy. Well, what's that mean? It means that the North Dakota Department, the regulatory agencies in North Dakota can permit those wells, and it's not reliant on the EPA. That's probably enough said right there, but I haven't checked in quite a while, but I don't think there's been a permit approved, carbon dioxide sequestration permit approved by the EPA in over 7 years. So I don't know what the time frame is, but it's over 7 years. I think it generally takes North Dakota 6 to 9 months, maybe a year. Call it a year. They can have the permit in your hand before you're ready to sequester the carbon dioxide. That's huge. So that's the regulatory part of it. The tax environment is really good and getting better. If you've heard my new boss's boss, I guess, Governor Armstrong, one of his key points is property tax reform. That's only going to help make North Dakota more attractive for that workforce that we're so desperately seeking. It's one more cog in the wheel. Income taxes are very low in North Dakota. They're not quite zero yet, but they're darn close. It actually almost becomes a sticking point. I'll have a company come to us and say, well, California offered us a $10 million tax abatement. And I'm like, well, how about if we just don't charge you $10 million and only charge you $1 million? They have to stand back and think about that math. It's like, the only reason they're offering you a $10 million tax abatement is because they were going to charge you $10 million in the first place. We were never going to charge you that money. So we got to do the math with them a few times, get the whiteboard out, and talk to them about that. So although we're trying to lower the tax burden in North Dakota, it's already pretty low compared to the rest of the nation. So it's one of our tools. It's one of our best tools that we can use to recruit companies. So
Makes us very competitive, yeah. So I know that there are really exciting industries that are advancing here, and I know that when we're able to hear stories of some of these companies or projects that you're working on, not the ones that are under NDA, but the others. Can you share a little bit on some of those industries, whether it's UAS or it's ag tech, whether it's manufacturing? And can you just give a little bit of an example of the kind of the diversification that we're seeing out there?
Sure. One of the, we've talked about, we've hit on this 2 or 3 times already today, but one of the big drivers in the state is utilization of natural gas. Mm-hmm. That's sort of coming to the top at the exact right time. There's a huge demand for energy worldwide right now, and that's being driven by data, AI data. That's being driven by that. When I worked for the power companies, if we had a power load request, I can't remember who I was talking to right before the meeting here, but of 2 or 3, 5, 10 megawatts, that was a big request. Mm-hmm. We're not even close to that anymore. You had to add at least 1 0, if not 2 zeros to those requests. So requests for 1,000 megawatts are pretty common right now. We don't have that right now, but we're getting closer and closer to that opportunity. Like I said, we have the energy. We just have to be able to convert it into electricity. That's going to take pipelines. That's going to take power generation units, and it's going to take a lot of capital, and it's going to take some drive. Right now, the natural gas is concentrated in the western part of the state. Obviously, we have to build out the infrastructure to bring that further and further east. Mm-hmm. There's at least 1 project, if not 2, to bring it at least to the Missouri River right now, and then plans to continue on east, eventually, hopefully here. So we can keep driving those opportunities to bring that natural gas all the way across the state. So data, that's a huge project that's coming to the state of North Dakota. Do you know one of the things that they love in the data industry? That North Dakota has just been gloriously displaying over the last 4 or 5 days?
Let me guess.
Yeah.
It's going to have something to do with the weather.
Cold
so.
weather is data's friend. They love cold weather. The facility that's being built down in Ellendale, they shared with me a number. I probably am going to mess it up here, but the power factor for a facility, say like in Georgia, is like 1.5. What that means is they need about 50% of their energy to not run their data processing. They need about 50% of their energy basically to cool their facility. It's 1.2 or so in North Dakota. That's a significant drop. So you'll be able to take that power and use it so much more efficiently in North Dakota because it's cool here more of the year, and it's a great opportunity. So data, AI, it's not going to slow down, and North Dakota is primed to be able to take part of that. We're also a very well-connected state. I mean, that surprises some people for being such a rural state, but we have very good fiber connection in North Dakota, some of the best in the nation. Utilizing other opportunities to use natural gas. Natural gas is part of processes. We've got an iron ore processing plant that's looking at landing in the state that needs energy. They need electricity and they need natural gas for their process and to power their system. So who'd have thought we would be an iron ore processing facility here in the state? A nickel processing facility is looking to come to the state too. I won't mention where they're coming from, but it's not very far from here. 5 miles, 4 miles. Actually, it's further than that. But they're coming to North Dakota to take advantage of the abundant available energy sources that we have. UAS technology is just idling, waiting to go. There's so much opportunity in the UAS world, and North Dakota has become a leader in that. Right now, there's a bill in the state legislature for the Northern Plains test site in Grand Forks to be able to have access. The bill is to fund the opportunity so the UAS or the Northern Plains test site can have access to FAA radar. I had to have them explain that to me, what that meant, but the FAA doesn't allow anybody access to their radar data. It's very well controlled. The UAS test site, Northern Plains test site in Grand Forks, has built that confidence in the FAA and now has access to that data. What's that mean? They can fly drones now with that data when they have that beyond visual line of sight, which means they don't have to see the drone that they're flying. They can track it with radar. Think about flying airplanes. If we had to maintain visual line of sight with airplanes that we flew, we wouldn't be where we are today. Well, that's coming. That technology or that opportunity is coming in the UAS world as well. So
that's great. Maybe we'll touch a little bit on the all of the advancements in UAS are really spectacular. We've got. Let's talk a little bit about agriculture because the diversification in agriculture is significant here. Everything from ag tech to value-added ag to now we're seeing a lot more investment in livestock options here. Can you touch a little bit on the kind of the future and the horizon of agriculture? Because so much of this we're hearing from a national perspective, both national security is dependent upon energy resilience.
Absolutely.
It's dependent upon food security. Touch a little bit on agriculture.
One phrase you used there was value add. That is the key phrase in everything we do. North Dakota is really good at producing commodities. We produce oil, we produce natural gas, we produce even electricity, although it is processed from coal or natural gas. That's still viewed as a commodity resource that's generally shipped out of state. Same in the ag world. Until 3 years ago, every soybean produced in the state was shipped somewhere else. Corn was that way prior to the 6 corn ethanol production facilities we have in the state now. Adding value to those commodities is the key to success in North Dakota. So in the last, I think it's 3 years, we've gone from 0% soybean processing in the state to, I think it's about half now, between Spiritwood, the Green Bison facility in Spiritwood, and then the facility in Castleton. It's about half. So that's incredible. And there's more on the horizon. There's more facilities on the horizon that are looking to process soybeans. Corn ethanol, that's a little bit older market. That started in early 2000s, like 2007, 8, 9, where they were building out ethanol facilities. I think there's 6 in the state. I might be high one there, but that's taking on a new life as well. There's a new demand for sustainable aviation fuel, which is a lower carbon option for airplanes, aircraft. That can be made from ethanol. It's not cheap. It's not easy. If it was easy, it'd already be being done, right? But that's an opportunity that's out there to take the ethanol coming from the ethanol plants, add more process to the backside of those ethanol plants, and produce sustainable aviation fuel. So that's one more value add we can do. We're already adding value to the corn by making ethanol. We can continue to add value to it and make sustainable aviation fuel. Animal agriculture. That's becoming, the regulations on that or the restrictions on that, I shouldn't say regulations. The restrictions on that are being loosened somewhat so that we can attract animal agriculture facilities. Because guess what? Now that I have all these ethanol plants and all these soybean processing plants, one of their main co-products is a feed product. Why don't we take that and continue to add value in North Dakota rather than shipping that feed product to somewhere else as well? So it's a continued value add stream. Everything that we do, what's the next step? So just continuing to add value is that we're never done. I will say we will never be done. We want to continue to add value to that stream. So.
Well, clearly there's a lot of exciting opportunities here in North Dakota. And Rich, we're so lucky to have you with us today. Thank you so much for taking time. We are excited for the future here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope it shows. I love what I'm doing. I have so much fun doing what I'm doing. It's an incredible opportunity I've had, late in my career. I never pictured myself doing what I'm doing today, but what a great opportunity, and what a great place to be doing it is in North Dakota. So.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you. Please give Royer. Thank you. All right, now we'll move on. Please help me welcome one of our premier sponsors of the day, Ray Grefsheim, to the stage from Bremer Bank.
When you're running a business, you don't have time for doubt.
You're welcome.
You need a banking partner you can trust. One who is as invested in the success of your business as you are, and has all the products and services you need under one roof. At Bremer Bank, we're here to listen and learn, because you know your business best, and we'll back you up with insightful advice and personalized solutions that help you achieve your goals. Work with Bremer Bank, because understanding is everything.
Good morning, everyone. Ray Grefsheim, Fargo Market Leader at Bremer Bank. Bremer Bank is proud to be a sponsor of today's event and a longtime partner of the Chamber. Bremer has been helping communities throughout Minnesota, North Dakota, and Wisconsin thrive for more than 80 years, and we are more excited than ever about what our future holds. The Chamber has a mission of being a catalyst for growth and prosperity. Events like today provide an excellent opportunity to connect with each other and hear from top economic experts about issues that are important to our local businesses in Midwest region's economic future. I would like to thank the Chamber for organizing this event and everyone in attendance for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here today. Next, we have the privilege of hearing from Matt Finn, today's keynote speaker. With over 30 years of experience in trust and investment management, Finn is the chief economist at 1834, a division of Old National Bank. He leads the company's economic outlook, asset allocation guidance, and portfolio management. Finn has volunteered with the Chartered Financial Analyst Institute for over 20 years, grading CFA exams and contributing to the profession. He regularly speaks at conferences on the U.S. economy and has mentored and led teams at Old National throughout much of his career. Finn holds a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Missouri and is a graduate of the American Bankers Association National Trust School and Northwestern's ABA National Graduate Trust School. He is also a Chartered Financial Analyst, charter holder, and a member of the CFA Institute. At the end of Matt's presentation, Shannon will join him on stage for moderated Q&A. You can submit questions using the QR code at your tables or by going to chamberquestions.com. You can ask questions anytime throughout the presentation. So please help me welcome your keynote speaker for today, Matt Finn.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Make sure my clicker works. Okay. There's no shortage of what I call economic point forecasts. What's the yield on the 10-year going to be in 6 months, or what's the unemployment rate going to be in a certain number of months? And I tend to really focus on bigger picture things because I've noticed that most of the time when those economic data points come out, economists like me spend most of their time explaining to you why it doesn't match their forecast. And so right? So you kind of give up on that. And the analogy that I've used with the economy is if I'm a shop owner in a port city, what I need to know is there's a cruise ship arriving tomorrow. It doesn't really matter whether there's 3,462 passengers or 5,280 passengers, right? I just need to know that there's a cruise ship coming tomorrow. So I tend to, again, focus on what I call bigger picture items. So I'm going to run through some things, particularly about the North Dakota and regional economy, and then sort of dive into what I see as, again, longer-term trends that are unfolding. There are a lot of moving pieces. Among them, Trump 2.0, we were talking last night that I'm actually sort of struck by the idea that people aren't calling out more of a contrast between what's going on in the first several days of this Trump administration versus what happened in the last Trump administration. And my feeling is he sort of got caught off guard, perhaps, on his first time around and decided not to make that same mistake. Whether you agree with it or not, that's probably what he's doing. We've got monetary policy easing. Now, I know the Fed is currently on hold. We don't expect the Fed to lower rates based on most recent economic data, things like CPI coming out a little hot, the unemployment rates dropping. So we're kind of in the camp of the Fed's going to be on hold for a while. We've got immigration, tariffs, inflation, energy policy, and some demographic changes. So what I thought, I'd run through right quick is to see, how all of this macro environment is impacting, or does it support growth in North Dakota? So you take oil and gas, for instance. Well, sure, the current administration is very pro-energy development and reducing the requirements for permitting and all the things that they're doing, freezing regulations and the like, is going to be generally positive for energy development here in the Dakotas. For agriculture, I put a question mark there. Being from Indiana, which is an agricultural state, I've never met a farmer who goes, yeah, everything's fine, don't need a thing, it's all good, right? So I put a question mark there to keep them happy, right? Because if I said, oh yeah, everything's fine, they'll find something to argue with you about. In terms of manufacturing, and I'm talking about I'm using that in the broadest sense of the term, but manufacturing, meaning we have a freeze on new regulations at the federal level, which is going to be good for small businesses, streamlining, processes for small businesses, application processes and the like. So in general, tax, there's a focus in Washington on lowering corporate tax rates and tax reform. So in general, my point here is that the setup is pretty good for manufacturing. And of course, defense spending, I think, we can all see that there's going to be increased defense spending under this administration. And so I think that's good, overall for the economy. In terms of opportunities then for North Dakota, I did some digging and found out that only 4.5% of North Dakota residents are foreign-born compared to 14% in the U.S. as a whole. And my point here is this is just an opportunity for North Dakota to increase the percentage of immigrant population. Higher education, while more North Dakota residents have a high school diploma than average, fewer have a college degree, only about 32% compared to 35% in the U.S. as a whole. You've got great universities here in North Dakota. There's a lot of opportunity. Their broadband internet, just slightly behind the U.S. as a whole, about 87.5% of North Dakota households have access to broadband internet. More people in North Dakota work. That's probably no surprise to the people in North Dakota. The participation rate, the number of people that are of an age to be in the labor force that actually choose to work, is 67.8% compared to about 63% in the U.S. as a whole. And substantially more women work in North Dakota, 64.2% versus 58.7% for the national average. And people here work hard. Again, that's probably no surprise if you're from North Dakota, but I was shocked to find out, because I'd never looked at it before, that North Dakota has the 6th highest per capita GDP out of all 50 states. GDP for the United States is about $66,800 per person, and in North Dakota it's $74,000. So people here work hard. People here aren't afraid to work, and so that's great for the state. And I think again, these are a lot of opportunities. What's sort of working against us here is, and my colleagues have heard me mention this slide, a lot of times. Every day in the United States, for about the next dozen years or so, 10,000 people turn 65. Let that sink in. 10,000 people a day. It's 300,000 people a month. That's 3.6 million people a year turn 65 every day. So what are the implications of that? Well, the good news is that, the population of North Dakota is slightly younger than the U.S. as a whole. 17% of North Dakotans are over 65, compared to 17.7% for the U.S. However, while the total population of North Dakota grew 15.8% between census 2010 to 2020, the percentage of North Dakota residents over the age of 65 grew 26%. So you're not immune to the fact that as an as a state, you're getting older, just like the rest of the United States. There are fewer young people in an older labor force. I think this graph is sort of interesting. What I want you to see here is the blue line that's sort of at the top represents the number of workers who are aged 20 to 24, okay? And the gold tan line is the labor force in the United States. What I want you to see here is, and this is a problem that we're coming up against, is the number of young people in the labor force today is the same as it was in 1979. But there are 100 million more people in the labor force. So what that tells me is the percentage of young people in the labor force has gotten much, much smaller, and the labor force has gotten much older. So this is a transition. This is something that we're going to have to deal with as we go over the next, say, decade. North Dakota has the second highest percentage of young workers, 20 to 24, in the whole United States. It's 7.6%. Some states are as low as 5% of their workers. So North Dakota does have a good resource here in that you have young workers. You have some great colleges. You need to retain those people in the state in order to promote local economic growth. This is a slide I've had for quite some time because the demographics don't change that fast. The blue bars represent the yearly change in available new workers. And what I want you to see is, back in 2000, we were adding as many as 2 to 2.25 million new workers into the labor force each year. And that has been steadily declining. Now you can see the disruption that came as a result of COVID, but we're back down to, we're only net adding about 500,000 people into the labor force each year. So where's the rest of it coming from? If you think about our labor force, there's, again, about 177 million people in the labor force. We add as an economy 2 million new jobs a year. 500,000 of them are coming from US-born workers. Where's the rest of them coming from? Immigration. Immigration has filled the majority of new jobs in this country for the last several years because we don't have enough people in the United States to fill those jobs. The line at the top is the fertility rate. Okay, the average woman is only having 1.6 children. That's below the replacement rate of 2.1. And so we're producing fewer children in our economy, and yet we're expecting it to grow 2.5% or 3% a year. How are we going to reconcile some of this? Further graphics, employment growth is slowing. This is, again, the civilian labor force by decade. This is just a growth rate, and you can see that as the baby boomers have worked their way through, the number of new workers has been steadily declining. So what we're looking to replace that with is AI and technology and that sort of thing. I'll get into that in just a second. This is a chart that's showing the share of foreign-born workers by occupation, not the absolute number. So the way you interpret this is the construction industry has the highest share of foreign-born workers at about 30%. The most foreign-born workers are in education and health services, which is about 3 or 4 from the bottom. That has the most workers, but that industry itself is much bigger than the construction industry, so the share of foreign-born workers is not quite as high. What I want you to see here is if we get a little overzealous with immigration reform, and if we get a little overzealous with deporting workers, this is where it's going to hit first, because these are the industries that are most vulnerable because they employ the highest share of foreign-born workers. What are we doing about this? Well, my friends at the Association for Advancing Automation, or A-Cubed, gave me some statistics on, this is an industry trade group, and they've gathered up the share of sales of industrial robots. And the blue lines represent automotive applications. So we've all seen the industrial robots that are painting cars, welding on cars, flipping them over, dipping, doing all that stuff. But what's interesting is now 56% of industrial robot sales are going to non-automotive applications. So I made this comment before. We'll see how many people get it. If you want to know when Skynet gets built, it's probably right around this time, if any of you have seen that movie. But I think what's interesting here is 2 of the fastest growing segments are food processing and handling. That's had 60% year-over-year growth. And pharmaceutical prescription processing. That's had 43% year-over-year growth in automation. I don't know if any of you saw this. A couple of weeks ago, it was in the Wall Street Journal, and Google Quantum AI had released this data, that they're working on a quantum computer that was able to solve a very complex problem in about 5 minutes that would take the current world's fastest supercomputer 10 to the 25th years to solve the same problem. So right about the time that we're having difficulty with an aging population, right about the time we're having difficulty getting young workers into the labor force, right, we're coming up with creative AI solutions. I've said this is a technology that perpetually feels like it's about 5 years away, but it may be only about 2 years away. In other words, we're advancing so fast and we're making so many inroads in AI that this may be what keeps our economy humming along right about the time that we're starting to run out of live bodies to fill some of these jobs. Tech investment drives productivity. What you can see here is this is the amount, the percentage of GDP that we spend on intellectual property and communication technology. You can see that the United States, down at the bottom, leads all other developed countries in the amount of money that we spend on intellectual property. And I think this is very, very important because tech drives productivity, productivity drives economic growth. And what you can see here, again, is that the average annual growth in our GDP is driven by largely gains in productivity and some in adding new people into the labor force. Whereas when you look at, say, the UK or other countries, most of their gain comes from their reliance on still adding people, right? Countries like Germany and France, the UK, are in the exact same situation we are. They have an aging population. They have trouble getting young people into some of the trades. They have trouble getting people into jobs that they need to fill. And what's happening to them is they're still relying on their old model, whereas the United States is embracing the fact that we need to raise productivity by employing technology. I'm going to skip over this real quick, but this is the latest beige book from the Minneapolis Fed, and this is the beige book from all of it, but overall, growth is increasing slightly in all the regions that the Fed covers, but not at a high pace. In other words, there's still a lot of disruption. I think this next slide is really more interesting. What this shows is, in previous beige books, how often respondents talked about things like a slowdown, lending issues, inflation, supply chain concerns, and suddenly everybody's talking about tariffs. Everybody wants to know how tariffs are going to impact their district, and so that's getting a lot more attention. We are in the camp of, we're not forecasting a recession. We're not forecasting even a soft landing, which would imply that we touch down to a zero growth rate and then take off again. We're forecasting that the economy in the United States is going to continue to grow at 2.5% or so, this year. So, and probably, a little bit better than that, perhaps next year. The latest employment report that came out showed that the unemployment rate dropped to 4%. It was a little bit higher, for 4.1% the previous month. You may have noticed that some of the comparisons get a little difficult because what happens is the Bureau of Labor Statistics surveys businesses just like they do, with political surveys. They survey a percentage of businesses and then extrapolate what the national unemployment rate is, what the number of jobs created is, all of that. As they go throughout the year and they get better data, they actually get more detailed data on the number of businesses that have been created. It's called the birth-death model. They actually get better data on unemployment claims and who's filed. They go through what's called a benchmark revision. They get better population estimates from the Census Bureau, all of that. And so all throughout the year, it's estimates upon estimates upon estimates, and then once a year, they go back and they reset all their data. So it makes comparisons between usually January and December are not good month over month because they've reset the benchmarks. But nonetheless, what we're seeing here is we've got a solid economy, and I've said all along that it's kind of hard to have a recession when everybody's working, right? So again, we're in the camp that the economy is going to go along pretty well in 2025. This is a graphic here of how normal people look at inflation. because what I've graphed here is, at the top line is the cumulative change in prices since January of 2021. And what you can see here is that prices are up about 21%. And then the line just below that is I've taken average hourly earnings from the monthly employment report, and I've multiplied that times weekly hours worked. So we've got a measure of weekly take-home pay from workers. And what we've seen here is the cumulative change in hourly wages, and actually that's somewhat of a typo because it's really the cumulative change in weekly take-home pay. That gap is an erosion of the standard of living. This is what workers and consumers are upset about, is they can feel it, they know it, and this is where you can see the data. So the overall price level has been rising faster than your take-home pay, and so this is what causes people to feel a little bit uneasy. I realize that the year-over-year change, the bottom line, is the change in CPI. It's the rate of inflation that everybody gets quoted. But the reason that there's some sort of disconnect between economists saying, relax, inflation's only 3%, and what people are feeling is shown in this graphic here, which is I've had an erosion in my standard of living, and we need to close that gap. There's been some talk about actually lowering prices. A lot of you will remember from your Econ 101 class that deflation, an actual lowering of prices, represents demand destruction, and that's bad. So what we're more likely to see is wages will have to start catching up to overall price levels. We talked about tariffs a little bit. Tariffs, it just depends on what day it is as to what's going on with the tariffs. That's been the biggest problem, is you don't really know what's going to stick and what's not going to stick. Let me see if I can quote some of this from memory. The United States economy is about $29 trillion a year, okay? We import roughly $4 trillion worth of stuff. $29 trillion economy, we import about $4 trillion worth of stuff every year. About 600 billion, you gotta be careful when you're quoting these millions and billions and trillions. 600 billion comes from China. So do the math. 4 trillion of stuff that we're importing from across the world, 600 billion of it comes from China. We raised the tariff on China 10%, so we're talking about $60 billion on a $4 trillion import line item on a $29 trillion economy. It's damaging, to say the least, but it's not catastrophic. And what we're showing here is, if you think the U.S. economy is growing at about 2.5% a year, currently imposed tariffs may take 1/10 or 2/10 off of the growth rate of the U.S. economy. I'm not dismissing the significance of raising prices on U.S. consumers. I'm not dismissing the significance of raising prices for manufacturers who rely on Chinese imports or rely on imports from other countries, but it's not enough to sidetrack the U.S. economy. When you look at other countries, and this is interesting too, when you look at, say, Canada, well, 70% of their economy is dependent on foreign trade. Only about 10% of the U.S. economy is dependent on foreign trade, but 70% of Canadian economy is dependent on foreign trade. When you look at the EU, it's even higher than that. It's like 80 to 90% of their economy is dependent on foreign trade. And I think, without getting political about it, but I think what the president is trying to do is to say, well, this is going to hurt you more than it hurts me. And so this tariff business is aimed at getting those countries to blink first. We talked last night at a gathering about the fact that there's a very narrow road that leads to success with this tariff business, and there's a lot of negative probabilities out there. So this is why it's got everybody freaked out, because again, it's not that we won't be successful, it's just that there are a lot of opportunities for missteps here, and so hopefully this all works out all right. I've said this for years, technology is not a job killer, it's a job reallocator. There's a great article in the Journal the other day about the fact that call centers, typically, the economics for a call center is they cost about $1 a minute per caller. So if you run a call center, every time somebody calls you, it's $1 a minute to have a live person answer the phone. Salesforce now sells a service called Agentforce. This isn't a commercial for them, it just happens to be what they're selling. That can cut the number of call center workers in half because it can do a lot of work using voice recognition technology, press 1, press 2, press 3, that sort of thing. It can do a lot of the legwork of looking up your account, right? You ever call with a credit card, airline, whatever, and they go, hold on a minute, I have to look up your account. Well, all right, so AI can do a lot of that legwork that reduces the number of operators, but at the same time, Salesforce is hiring 2,000 new salespersons to sell Agentforce. Every time, whether it's telephone operators, bank tellers, travel agents, what have you, every time those jobs have been eliminated or replaced by new technology, those folks as a whole are getting better jobs with more pay due to AI. So it's reallocating jobs. The last point I'll make on this is McKinsey did a study that's projecting 8 to 9% of labor demand in just 5 years will be in types of jobs that don't exist today. So think about that. Up to 10%, let's be generous, up to 10% of new jobs in the next 5 years will be jobs that don't even have a job title today. So I think that's kind of fascinating. Kind of getting to the end here, wrapping up, but I wrote this slide about a week ago, and it's already, somewhat out of date. Trump will likely tighten legal immigration. Let's think about this. Again, rough, tough. The economy generates 2 million new jobs a year. We need, at a minimum, about 1.5 million immigrants to fill those jobs because we're only producing about 500,000 new workers into the labor force each year. So again, not getting political, but whatever gang members we want to deport, we're all about it. But the problem is if we start to get a little overzealous here, immigrants are currently providing the backbone, as it were, of the U.S. workforce in terms of new jobs, allowing the economy to grow. We're relying on AI to supplant some of that, but those two have to meet at an appropriate point, and we're not there yet on AI. We're getting closer, but those two have to meet. So there's an opportunity for a short-term misstep here as it relates to immigration. Same thing for tariffs, right? There's an opportunity here to misstep on the tariff wars and leads to negative outcomes. I know we're going to get a question about deficits and debt. Again, rough, tough. The United States raises through taxes, tariffs, and other means about $4 trillion a year. We're spending $6 trillion a year. We're running a $2 trillion a year deficit. Now, the rat through the snake is the baby boom generation, the 10,000 people a day that are turning 65 every day that are saying, okay, I've been paying into Social Security for the last 45 years. I want mine, right? They're signing up for Medicare, and they want to get paid. And so I don't think that there's a lot that federal government can really do about that except pay those people off. So we've got Elon Musk trying to find other ways to save money, and that's all well and good, except 10,000 people a day are going, I want my check from the federal government, and that's going to continue on for another couple of decades. Considering I'm one of those people, maybe 2.5 decades, that'd be nice. But in the meantime, that's somewhat problematic. Drill, baby, drill is a nice sentiment, but he's not the one spending the money. It's the oil companies that are going to have to raise the capital and decide whether they want to commit to these new projects and explore and do the things that they want to do. So again, the environmental setup, for this, I don't mean environmental, I shouldn't use that word, but the setup, the regulatory environment for this is good. It's just going to take some time because it's not like the oil companies can just turn a dial and increase production. I think over the next several years, again, banking regulations should ease up. The Fed is trying to lower rates and become much more accommodative with their monetary policy. The federal government is looking to lower taxes, right? The federal government is, again, easing up on regulations. Small to mid-sized companies generate 80% of all new jobs in this country. So is the environment for small to mid-sized businesses conducive to growth? I think it is. Lower energy prices, again, as this unfolds over a number of years, is that good for generating higher levels of growth? Sure it is. We get more labor force participation. We get better manufacturing, and maybe these tariffs lead to more onshoring. Maybe it positions U.S.-produced goods in a more favorable light because of the inherent cost structures of trying to produce something and sell it cheaply in what I call our first world country, right? We have standards of living here, and we're not going to employ workers at the same rate that they can make in other countries. So, it's only going to improve that a little bit. I'm in the higher for longer camp, point 7 here. I'm in the higher for longer camp. I think bond yields stay higher for longer because the government is going to continue to run a deficit. Maybe not as much of one, but they're going to continue to run a deficit. Bond yields, I think, are going to have to rise somewhat. I think we'll see, again, higher growth in defense spending. I think we'll see a reduction in illegal immigration, which hopefully stabilizes everything. And I think we get some reduction in inflationary pressures as the government reallocates some resources from the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. Big themes going forward. This is my last slide. Big themes going forward. Healthcare. Again, 10,000 Americans turning 65 every day. And think about the potential here. We can't have 10,000 people. I'm not saying when you turn 65 you go into a home, but what I'm saying is 10 years from now, well, thankfully, right? 10 years from now, 10,000 people a day, rough, tough, are going to turn 75, right? 20 years from now, 10,000 people a day are turning 85. I mean, think about the math that way. We can't have all those people moving into assisted living facilities. We don't have the staff for that. We're already talking about the fact that we don't have enough workers to fill the available jobs, right? There are 1.2 job openings for every unemployed worker in the United States. We simply can't fill those jobs. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to employ technology, wearable technology, virtual doctor visits, nurse visits, right, in your home, allowing you to stay at home. So the name of the game here with healthcare is keep mom and dad home longer. Artificial intelligence and robotics, we've talked a lot about that, but here's the big picture, the last thought I'll leave you with on that. If your population is not growing, the only way to continue to grow your economy is you have to replace that with technology. You have to fill that gap with technology. And so this is either going to work or it's not going to work. But it seems to be working so far, but we're not really there yet. We haven't seen all of the really cool stuff that's going to happen yet. And then I think you can't have more information, right? Right now, everybody carries around a cell phone. Everybody can find out everything all the time. And I don't think you can have that sort of technology and have isolationism, right? I think you see more and more interconnectedness across the world as information becomes more and more available. But I also think we're going to see somewhat of a manufacturing renaissance in the United States. I think there's a lot of, and particularly, you know, as the earlier speaker was talking about, North Dakota is a great place to start businesses. Indiana is a great place to start businesses. There are a lot of Midwest states that have a very, very favorable economic environment, a great labor force full of good people, lots of land, lots of resources, lots of power generation capabilities, and I think that the Midwest is going to benefit from that over the next decade or so. Let me stop there and ask Shannon to come back up on stage. I think we're going to do some Q&A. All right. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
All right. I'll sit on this side this time.
Oh,
just
there
to
you go.
change it up a little bit. So, all right. Well, first of all, hugely insightful. Thank you, Matt, for that. Now excited to have a little bit of, again, interaction with all of you and your questions. So please start to send those in. I'm starting to see some of them already. Those QR codes on your tables or chamberquestions.com. So let's start, there's so many places, but let's start first with, I thought this was fascinating. Last night we had a VIP summit with our sponsors, and Congresswoman Julie Fedorchak,
Yes.
newly elected Congresswoman, joined us. She talked about her priorities as she now is really looking at energy regulation, and made this comment about the national debt. So the national debt is now 36 trillion.
About 36 trillion.
And to put that in perspective, I thought this was an amazing analogy that she shared. She shared that if you were to spend $20 a second, it would take you 19 months to spend $1 billion. If you spend $20 a second, it would take you 1,576 years to spend $1 trillion. And we are $36 trillion in debt. So as you think about, as you talk about the economy and the decisions that are being made now, what are your thoughts around how those decisions are being impacted by that looming debt that we have, and how are we ever going to get progress in that?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I don't want to bring the room down, but growing the national debt is an inevitability for about the next 20 years because we have used Social Security money to fund other areas of government. And so now that the bill is coming due, the baby boomers are retiring, we're going to have to fund that through debt. Most mainstream forecasters are suggesting that our debt could top out at around $50 trillion. That sounds like a lot of money. It is. We produce $29 trillion a year in our economy, but debt is going to continue to increase. And I think that it's great that your tax dollars will be spent more efficiently. Anything we can do to increase efficiency is a good thing. As Elon Musk has said, is he going to bat 1,000? No. Does he expect to be called out when he says something off? Sure. But if they can find more ways to increase government efficiency, that's just all the better. But I don't want to be a gloom and doomer about it because the United States is a sovereign nation. We can pay off our debt, but in the meantime, it's going to grow, and that growth in the federal debt makes it very difficult to lower interest rates, and it makes it very difficult to lower borrowing costs, and so that is a bit of a headwind. It's a bit of a headwind for the U.S. economy.
So as we think about, and you've talked a lot about the tariffs, this is probably the number one thing that I am hearing as a chamber leader here is the significance of our proximity to Canada, and it's amazing, right? We're hearing most of the tariff conversation is really, at least in the Midwest, in our area, is focused on Canada, much less on Mexico and China, and I think it's probably just because that's where we get so many of our goods and that interaction with Canada. But I found it fascinating how you were talking about the dependency on this, or maybe the hype around it, obviously, right? Is it overhyped? And what do you say to those mid-sized small companies or the larger manufacturers that are dependent upon the steel, the aluminum, as far as what this tariff piece, how do you not have panic ensued in
Right.
the general business
Yeah, I mean,
leader?
if you're a home builder and you're looking at the cost of lumber, increasing, it's very difficult, and so it is. There's a lot of I wouldn't call it maybe full-blown panic, but there's a lot of concern over the potential for these tariffs to be fully implemented, to raise costs and the like, and I think that it is a little bit unnerving. I think businesses just need to remain focused on, again, their long-term plans and realize that a lot of this won't actually come into fruition, and that I believe the president is using tariffs, particularly with Canada and Mexico, right? Because it's like all of a sudden, and hopefully, but they're like, what the heck? I mean, we didn't do anything, and now we're getting these tariffs, but to the president's point, it's like, well, that's just the whole point. You didn't do anything. So he's looking for them to increase border security, stop the flow of illegal drugs, stop the flow of illegal people, that sort of thing. And he's using the threat of economic damage in order to get them to do something internally. So I don't believe the president and the president's advisors are like, hey, let's tank the U.S. economy by raising the cost of goods for everybody. I don't think that's what they're hoping for, is that the other countries blink first. So.
Good point. And I think it's on a that multi-pronged approach or multifaceted approach, is really thinking that there are many more aspects to this than simply the tariff component of it. So, as you just mentioned it being a home builder, so I would love to ask your thought and question on two other big issues we're hearing that ultimately affect workforce, the ability for more people to be in the workforce, are housing and childcare. Those are a couple things that maybe weren't mentioned here. Can you speak to either one of those as parts of a critical part of the economy or a hindrance of the economy?
So last month, we built, on an annualized basis, 1.3 million new homes. So in other words, the housing start data for January came out, and if we build the same number of houses in January, right, the annualized rate is about 1.3 million housing units. The population of the United States is rough, tough, 345 million people. Generally speaking, we add 3 million people a year to the U.S. population, and we're building 1.3 million new houses. We've been doing that for 20 years. Yeah, we got a housing problem. We've got this is what has created the fact that housing affordability is at an all-time low because interest rates have gone up. We have a shortage in the supply of houses being built in the United States that doesn't keep up with the population, and so it's forcing people into multifamily. And there's a phenomenon called lock-in, which means if I'm currently living in a home for which I've refinanced my mortgage at 3.25%, and the current prevailing mortgage rate is 7-something, I'm sort of locked in, because in order to sell my home and find something else, I'd have to eat that higher mortgage rate, and people don't want to do that. And so the result is it's kept mom and dad in a home that's too big, because their kids are all gone now. It's kept young families in a home that's too small, because they're starting to outgrow it as they have children and begin to expand. And it's led to a real conundrum here with housing. I don't know how we get out of it, to be honest. It's going to take home builders building smaller homes. There's a lot to unpack there with the housing market.
And we're seeing a lot of states, Midwest states, I know for sure, both in North Dakota and Minnesota, looking at, are there some types of programs that the states can put forward, right, that allows for some match dollars to really incentivize development and further home building. Is that something that we should be looking at a federal level, or is this really it's so different from
I think it's
state
better
to
handled
state?
on the local level.
On the state level, yeah.
Everything's better handled on the local level, right? I mean, other than the Army, I'll give them that. Everything's better at the local level.
Although we would like some regulations to stay consistent from state to state, but we can get into that. Some great questions. I was just going to say that the housing piece is kind of this tsunami of everything together. And interestingly enough, we have a question that said, considering the silver tsunami we are seeing in the workforce, what are you seeing in the business transition environment? Are business owners selling to private equity at higher rates, or considering alternative transition structures such as sales to employees, specifically through employee stock ownership plans?
Yeah, it depends on what kind of business you're in. I mean, we've seen a lot of interest in private equity. We've seen there's been a huge increase. This is related. Give me a minute. The Wilshire 5000 stock index only has about 3,500 companies in it. Where the other 1,500 go, the problem is nobody's going public anymore. They're being sold to private equity firms and the like. So even the Wilshire 5000 can't keep up, right? The Russell 1000 still has 1,000 companies in it, but the makeup is changing all the time because not enough companies are going private, or going public, I should say. They're going private. So, we're seeing a rise in the alt market, specifically because investors can't get the diversification that they need in the public equity market. And so we're seeing a dramatic increase in interest in the alts market as a result of that.
Interesting. Another question from the audience. Please keep sending them in. This is great. Do you think entitlement reform is inevitable? Do you think it is required effectively manage our country's debt problem?
I think some entitlement reform is inevitable. I think that the reality of what the president wants to do about lowering taxes, right? It means that we're going to have to do something about what is the role of the federal government in your life, right? As opposed to, again, state and local authorities, churches, charities, that sort of thing. And I think we've gotten away from people being taken care of in the community where they live and being taken care of by the federal government. And that's, I think that's a goal here anyway, is to reform.
Yeah, and on that federal government piece, I think we get asked a lot about what's the federal government and what's the state government's role in the whole workforce side of it. So let's switch a little bit to more workforce. By far, the piece that we hear the most is the concern about workforce. I think you said it well, and I'll just add that we need more babies, more immigration. We need you to work longer, and we need automation and AI, right? I mean, that's really kind of what I'm thinking about, right? So the more babies piece of it, we also know is a much longer term. It's going to take a little while for them to get into the mix of things. But let's talk a little bit about which of those is most important. Or what are you seeing as the priority piece around immigration, keeping people in, working longer, automation and AI? How do we balance all of that?
I think the goal here is, and again, I'll use the term first world country, right? An advanced economy. and this happens across all advanced economies, is as you rise in affluence, those economies tend to have fewer children. Women, God bless women, they make up 60% of college students. That's a wonderful, wonderful development. The problem is they're now much older when they graduate college. They're having difficulty finding a suitable mate because most of us that are married try to marry up, right? We think we're marrying somebody that's right? Exactly, right? I outran my coverage a long time ago, but women, because they're much more educated compared to historically.
You could just say we're smarter. It's fine. You could
Sure.
do that.
But are having difficulty finding that person that allows them to marry up. And so they're getting married later, and because they're getting married later, they're starting a family later, and because they're starting a family later, they don't have that many years where they desire to have children. And so this problem that we have is ingrained in society. The United States and Canada years ago, I mean, our ability to think stuff up far exceeds our ability to do anything about it, right? We can't make everything we want, even if we had to make it all in the United States. There's not enough labor to make everything that we consume. That's the advantage of being a highly developed economy. And so I think that problem is endemic in the economy. AI is supposed to make that easier, right? I'm embracing this change in technology. I love my job. Those guys are sitting out there. I love my job. I don't want to be doing it when I'm 75, right? So in other words, I'm embracing technology that enables us to live better lives at an easier pace. There are millions and billions of people around the globe who would gladly do the work that my dad used to do, that my mother used to do, that none of us want to do anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's I think that's the biggest piece around immigration for us. We hear from a lot of, when we saw the slide, foreign-born workers, high-end construction, clearly here in agriculture.
Yeah.
What are some of the short-term, we look at immigration from a short-term lens and a long-term lens. What are some of the short-term things that need to happen in immigration? We know we've been in gridlock forever with two parties, one on DACA, one on the border. And so what could we do short-term, and then what are more long-term strategies as you look at immigration reform?
In the short term, we need to, again, I'm not trying to sound like I'm a politician. In the short term, we need to secure the border and gain. Immigration needs to be handled on our terms, not on somebody else's terms. So we need to secure that. Clearly, we need to make it easier to come in through the front door, apply for a Social Security card, get a job, start paying into Social Security for me. So we need to make it easier for people to immigrate to the United States legally under a controlled environment. I mean, I think that's the short-term solution here is to get a handle on all the chaos. And again, longer term we'll see, because to the extent that the United States is spending a lot more money on artificial intelligence and the like than other countries are, perhaps we'll still need many immigrants, and we embrace that, but perhaps we don't need as many as we thought, because right now we're relying on them to do a lot of the manual work.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that we hear a combination of that also. As you think about current visa programs, how
Right.
can we've got arbitrary caps set on some of them. We've got antiquated language associated with them. So visa reform could also be part of that. But you touched a little bit on some of those, I would call, populations of immigrants that are easier to bring through legal immigration. This ties into the next question I have for you about, we have a lot of education, higher education professionals in the room, partners of ours, partners of industry. When I think about immigration, so a couple questions. One, I think about how do we provide more citizenship for students that are coming through our college systems that are able to that want to stay here. But what does education, how does higher education really play into the economy around workforce demand and what we're doing with education? What needs to happen in education to really match and meet the needs of business and industry?
Well, that's what needs to happen. Education needs to match the needs of what's being demanded out there, and we're, higher education institutions are finding that out. I have 4 children; they've all been to college. One of them is a nurse, so very practical degree. One of them majored in international studies, and so we're not quite sure yet what that brings to the table. But the issue is really for higher education is to match the needs of the workforce. And I think that to some extent, the idea that, all these kids need to go to college and get a 4-year degree, it's like, well, if you talk to the trades, they're struggling, right? They need electricians, they need plumbers, they need carpenters, they need bricklayers, they need, the trades need people. And I think we're not doing a good enough job guiding young people into the trades until they realize that they can make more money than some of their college-educated friends who have a degree in international studies. And so,
And maybe no debt.
Yeah, and no debt. So yeah, I think that's...
But I do agree. There's that balanced approach. We need 4-year, we need 2-year, we need direct entry. That is a piece, and so much of that starts with the parents, right? The perception of the parents, and how are you guiding your children into these different careers? We're also finding that that exploration is starting earlier and earlier, right? We've got elementary kids looking at what they want to do. Here's a shift from the audience. How do you see the current and predicted economic climate impacting philanthropic and charitable giving?
Well, Americans are a generous people, but tax reform clearly drives a lot of that, right? We have a thing in wealth management where we're encouraging some of our more affluent clients to make qualified charitable contributions, QCDs, out of their IRA. So it's like, don't take the money out of your IRA, pay taxes on it, your required minimum distribution, and then turn around and give money to your church. I told a client the other day, stop writing checks to the church. Just figure out how much you want to give them. We'll take your annual distribution out of your IRA, and we'll just send that directly to the church, and then you don't have to pay any income taxes on that. So to the extent that tax reform will drive some of that, but again, I mean this most sincerely, Americans are very generous people and want to take care of their community. So I don't see that charitable gifting or philanthropy will dry up if you don't have a tax incentive to do it, but it just takes a little, it might take some shifting in attitudes.
Great. So I know we're running short on time. Believe me, I get the red timer on here that says, please wrap up, please wrap up. But, and this is where they hate when I say but I have a couple lightning questions.
Sure.
1 or 2 answer, really quick, rapid fire. Okay, ready? Mm-hmm. All right. 1 word to describe the economic outlook.
Optimistic.
1 economic indicator you're watching right now.
I'm watching weekly unemployment claims because I want to know very quickly when the employment situation starts to soften, if it does.
You're so funny because you say you're not a politician, but you can't do a 1 or 2 word answer,
Yeah, I
right?
know,
Okay,
I
so,
know.
all right, recession
I'm
or
an economist. That's even worse.
recession or sustainable growth?
Growth.
Perfect. Biggest strength of the Midwest economy?
People.
Industry with the most growth potential in the next 5 years?
Oh, AI, most definitely. And healthcare for sure.
Biggest villain in the economy? Interest rates, inflation, or something else?
Inflation, always.
Most overused economic buzzword of 2025?
Doge.
And one surprising economic trend in the next 5 years?
I think, again, not in a bad way, but I think we're all going to be shocked when the Fed pivots and has to raise rates in about 5 years. So.
Well, we could have had a lot longer conversation. So, Matt, thank you so much for being here, for bringing
my
your
pleasure.
expertise. Please help me thank Matt Finn.
Thank you very much.
All right, to our online viewers, you get a 10-minute break. To all of you here, 10 minutes, and we'll reconvene back here in a very short amount of time.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Midwest Economic Outlook Summit will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. Once again, the Midwest Economic Outlook Summit will begin in 5 minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. The second half of the Midwest Economic Outlook Summit will begin shortly.
This is your region. These are your resources. This is your reliable, affordable, cleaner than ever electricity. We're all in on all of the above energy.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage President and CEO of Cass County Electric Cooperative, Paul Mathis.
Well, quickly before I get started, I'm going to do my favorite thing to do when I speak to people, and that's to go off script. And I know Peyton is just cringing right now, but one of the comments that was made to Matt and Shannon about the silver tsunami that's taking over, I just want you to know I resemble that remark. Okay, back on track. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you today, and I'm excited to share in this conversation about the future of our region's economy. My name is Paul Mathis, and I have the privilege of serving as President and CEO of Cass County Electric Cooperative. We are proud to co-sponsor the Midwest Economic Outlook Summit this year alongside Bremer Bank. Cass County Electric is a member-owned cooperative, meaning we're governed by the members we serve. Our mission is to provide reliable power and reinvest into the community, ensuring that prosperity of our members and of the region. We serve 10 counties in the southeast part of North Dakota, including much of Fargo and West Fargo. As a not-for-profit organization, our board of directors allocates excess revenues called margins back to our members. This year, we're pleased to return $2.75 million back to our members. In recent years, high inflation and interest rates have brought stress to many. But Cass County Electric has been able to keep electric rates low and stable and maintain record reliability, even through events like the unprecedented 2023 Christmas ice storm. This success can be attributed to running our operations efficiently and embracing technology. We are fortunate to be in an area where economic growth and prosperity continue to thrive. Over the past 23 years, we've added an average of 1,600 new accounts annually, directly reflecting our community's growth. I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC for their dedication to fostering new businesses and ensuring the growth of existing ones through the Innovate 28 initiative. The Chamber has a fantastic program lined up for us today, and thank you again for being here and continued supporting of our community. With that, let's dive into the final Power Pack segment of today's program. Up next, we have an expert panel that will explain strategic investment trends across banking, housing, and private equity, giving you information to navigate today's evolving financial landscape. Scan the QR codes on your table or go to chamberquestions.com to submit questions to our panelists. Leading today's conversation is Catherine Berkland, Ronald K. and Olson Dean of the North Dakota State University College of Business. Let's welcome Catherine and the panel to the stage.
Thank you. Good morning. It's nice to see all of your smiling faces this morning. I am glad to be here. Thank you for asking me. Thank you to the Chamber for asking me to moderate the panel of experts that we have here with us today. For those of you I haven't met, as he said, I'm Catherine Berkland. I'm the Ronald and Kay Olson Dean at the NDSU College of Business, and I've been in town for about 18 months now, so I thank you for the warm welcome that my family and I have received. I appreciate the community and the way that we've been able to integrate, so thank you for that. My background is that I am a macroeconomist by training, so today is my bread and butter. It's fantastic. I also appreciate that Matt was the one to give the predictions, so that if things don't turn out the way he predicted, you can go back to him, and I don't have to make any predictions. So I appreciate that as well. We are going to talk a little bit about investments today and how the growth that Matt referenced and the growth that Rich talked about can be facilitated with some of those investments and how that works and what that future might look like. So with me today, I have a fantastic panel. We've got Julie Whitney, Senior Vice President at Bremer Bank. She is representing our discussion about banking finance. Michael Neal, a Senior Fellow at Urban Institute, is talking about our housing and real estate investments. And Cody First, Director at 50 South Capital, who's talking about private equity and venture capital. So we'll go ahead and get started. My first question is a softball. Please introduce yourself and your organization and tell us a little bit about the investment focus that you have and what you're sharing today that connects to our economic growth outlook.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Julie Whitney with Bremer Bank. I cover, my team and I cover our commercial segments in our 3-state footprint. And I office here in Fargo, and I'm thrilled to be here today. So the investment area that I'm representing today is business investment from a banker's perspective, and I think you asked, how that's important. How does that contribute to the community? And in the simplest of terms, we take savings, we transform them into loans. Those loans provide liquidity for businesses so that they can run their operations smoothly, they can pay their employees, and most importantly for today, they can invest in new opportunities. So we commonly extend loans for equipment purchases, plant expansions, growth. We'll help fund working capital for growing businesses, acquisitions, and those types of things. So that's what we contribute.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Neal. Again, it is great to be here with you, although I'm freezing. So there's that. I'm from Washington, D.C., below the Mason-Dixon line, where it's a little bit warmer, but not by much. And I'm a fellow at the Urban Institute. I do a lot of research related to the economy, related to the housing market, thinking about the housing market more generally, but also thinking about winners and losers, who benefits and who often is not able to get into and sustain home ownership. The Urban Institute is a think tank that was created during the presidency of Lyndon Johnson, really focused on providing data and evidence toward influencing and informing the policy debate. And I think at the same time, really focused on issues related to domestic challenges faced around the country. My background, I started off first at the home builders, at the National Association of Home Builders, thinking a lot about supply issues there before moving to Fannie Mae and thinking about demand side kind of challenges related to mortgages. I personally love housing. I'm one of those people who started off in the macro finance space and moved over to housing. And I find, number one, that it's a very, very intuitive, in part because housing is so critical to all of our personal lives. We all have stories around the experiences, the excitement that we had in homes, things that we've celebrated, but also things that we might have cried over, and all of that happens in home. And so it gives it a much more intuitive approach to kind of thinking about the world relative to other topics, in my own opinion. But at the same time, housing is critical for the economy, right? I mean, we tend to think, that first, housing produces jobs. Businesses hire. At the same time, when people buy homes, they often, or when they're selling a home, they often make improvements to their home. And so that also boosts economic growth. But we also know that housing is a leading indicator of the economy. That is, if you want to kind of know what's going to happen to the economy overall, 6 months, maybe 12 months into the future, look at housing. But at the same time, that also means that housing leads us out of economic conundrums. That is, a lack of economic activity. What is it that gets people moving again? How does the economy grow? Why does it not continue to decline? In part, it's the animal spirits and the risk-taking that's associated with builders who take those low interest rates, in turn seek to build homes, and in turn then wind up jump-starting the economy. The last thing I'll say is that it's important for municipalities as well. That is that the local tax revenues tend to increase consistent with more housing activity. So for all of these reasons, housing is just so critical for the economy.
Good morning, everyone. First, thanks to the Chamber for pulling us all together, and thanks to NDSU for moderating this panel. I'm a proud NDSU grad, so this feels like a very full circle moment to be sharing the stage with the Dean. My name's Cody First, and I work with 50 South Capital. We're an institutional private equity firm that has deep roots in the Midwest. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Northern Trust. Northern is older than the state of North Dakota and has long been bullish on the Midwest. But our team at 50 South is, like I said, institutional private equity, which primarily means that we invest in funds, and so we are a fund of fund. We invest across the capital stack, so we invest in venture, predominantly on the early stage. We invest in buyout opportunities. We've got a very active private credit team right now as the market's really interested in that as a product, and a very busy secondaries team as LPs are looking for liquidity and looking to kind of sell things earlier than some funds are holding. We also do direct co-investment strategies. And outside of our core funds, we have a pretty active separately managed account business where a fund of one hires us to really do two things. One, to make money, and two, to change the numerator of something that client cares about. So in the case of North Dakota, we were able to launch a fund and serve as a general partner of the North Dakota Growth Fund, which was the in-state investment strategy that was launched in 2021. If you follow the legislative process, it was the House Bill 1425 that really looked at the legacy fund and said, what would it look like if we took some of North Dakota's money and actually bet on North Dakota? And that legislation changed the asset allocation and activated the in-state strategy, which, again, 50 South was hired to serve as a general partner. I'm a ranch kid from southwestern North Dakota and still can't believe I get paid to bet on North Dakota every single day. But I think, the core things have always been true here, which is people are solving real problems. We haven't had the opportunity to do stupid things because there's been capital restraints, so there's really good businesses here. And communities like Fargo have done a tremendous amount of work to build an ecosystem that supports people taking risks. And so it's been a real privilege to do the work since 2021 in North Dakota, but more broadly, 50 South also manages in-state programs for the state of Indiana and the state of Illinois. And so in the last 10 years, we've invested over $1 billion into funds across venture and private equity and have a really wide view on the market that's going on kind of in our backyard.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. I have a whole list of questions because I would not be a professor if I did not come prepared with all of the questions that I ever wanted to ask them. But if you would like to ask a question, don't forget that at your table, there's a QR code that you can send your questions in, or go to chamberquestions.com, be able to send your question in. They will appear on this monitor here that's in front of me, so I can add them to my list. That's the professor look that says, you're supposed to ask questions, don't forget. So if you have questions for our panelists, make sure you send them in. Julie gets my first question. So when we think about expansion, so we heard from Matt, we heard from Rich that there are opportunities for expansion in the state of North Dakota, in the state of Minnesota. There are opportunities and really looking toward whether it's tech things, whether it's people-oriented things, there are opportunities to expand our business. So if we want to expand, often businesses are going to come to a business banker if they want to expand, if they want to buy another company, if they want to acquire, merge, or whatnot. When we think about coming to a traditional bank to get financing, the ability to get financing has changed a lot over even just the time that, even the time that I've lived in North Dakota, it's changed. So can you explain what's been happening in bank financing availability lately and what it's like now? So.
Yep, absolutely, thank you. So economic cycles always have a big impact on how banks are able to fund loans. But most recently, the biggest issues are inflation and interest, and I think everybody in this room probably knows that. In 2022, the Federal Reserve started ramping up pretty quickly its federal funds rate, and that ultimately, for a number of reasons, led to some liquidity constraints. And kind of on the most extreme end of that, in 2023, we saw a handful of kind of high-profile bank failures. The banking industry is strong, but that limited liquidity in the market and the limited capital led banks to pull back on lending. And so some of the ways that impacted businesses is it was a little more challenging to get credit. Banks were allocating their credit to their what they consider their good relationship customers. To those with the strongest credit, spreads on bank loans went up to account for the supply-demand mismatch on liquidity. So that's most recently that's been the impact to businesses as it relates to bank financing. The Federal Reserve has started cutting. They started cutting rates in September, came down 1% in total. To Matt's point, they paused. Anybody's guess on how long that's going to last? The outlook seems relative. I mean, I think in our community, we really are resilient and we're innovators, and so we can get through all different kinds of cycles. But we are seeing bank balance sheets are strong. Liquidity is improving. Banks learned some valuable lessons in 2023. They put some work to remedying those issues. And we're seeing competition ramp up in some cases. The 1% reduction in the Fed funds rate resulted in lower short-term rates. Long-term rates have been more stubborn and more volatile, and maybe more subject to fluctuation from some of the uncertainties in the market. But I think in general the outlook is I think in general the outlook is positive. You heard Matt. No recession. No soft landing. We're just going to keep humming along, and definitely I think in the Midwest we see a lot of positivity going forward.
It's like you knew that was my next question, which was what I was going to ask. What did we think was your outlook moving forward, and whether we thought that would change the ability to get financing and whatnot. So I will augment that question. So we know that there's a bit of uncertainty happening in the macro economy. Give me your understanding of how much banks like uncertainty.
Banks do not like uncertainty. Business decision makers don't like uncertainty either. I mean, nothing will stop in your tracks quicker than not knowing what your next move should be. So yeah, uncertainty is certainly tricky. There's a lot of talk out there. There's certainly a lot of real challenges. But I would just try to parse the challenges from the noise. There's a lot of noise. I think, again, in this community is so resilient. What we see when times get tough, we see our community really rise up, and for those who are ready and willing to be flexible, those who are ready and willing and prepared to take advantage of the challenging times and turn those into their own market competitive improvements. Those are the ones that emerge strongest. So that's I think generally.
Yeah, and I think that echoes what Matt said as well, that there's a lot of noise, but maybe the impacts are not going to be as big as we thought they would necessarily be. So when we think about impacts on business and we think about the ability to grow your business here in the state of North Dakota, we know that getting workforce is an issue and finding them a place to live is an issue. So I'm going to turn my next question to Michael, because this is, when we think about firms, really at the basic sense for an economist, firms need capital and they need workers. Those are the things that they use, and they put those together with technology and they make output. And so we think about, how do we get workforce? Where do we have a place for them to live? So I'm going to turn my question to Michael. Real estate and housing are important. We know they bring in workers. How is the real estate market in the Midwest doing compared with the rest of the other areas of the country?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll answer it in two ways. I think compared to how the market has evolved over time, I think is one way of kind of looking at it and thinking about it. But then kind of comparing it to the rest of the country, I think is another way. If you don't mind, I'm going to start with the first one and then move to the second one, and say a couple of things. I mean, it's certainly a challenge. I mean, a lot of what you said about interest rates and debt really matter, in part because housing is a debt finance industry, both on the supply side, but also on the demand side. Now, what's interesting there is, in part, the challenges of financing on the supply side, at least according to the home builders, account for roughly 1.5%, 2% of the final cost of a home. It really is kind of concentrated in construction costs. But on the demand side, that's where we see it really being a challenge with respect to higher mortgage rates, fueling a broader conversation about the lack of affordability. All of that saying that we've certainly seen home sales struggle over the last few years. We've seen housing activity more broadly be challenged in ways that I think depart from what we've seen in the overall economy more generally. That being said, though, I think when we turn specifically to this part of the country, there are some additional silver linings when we think about what's going on elsewhere. Certainly, when we look at lists of affordability, we see that the greatest challenges are certainly kind of in those coastal areas. At the same time, the home ownership rate tends to be higher kind of across the Midwest. And thirdly, at least more recently, we have seen, at least in terms of permits, we've seen a bit of a faster growth in permits to actually start a home in the Midwest relative to the rest of the country. Now, that doesn't take away from the lack of housing, but it does suggest that there's a bit more of a faster growth in terms of the housing that's coming down the pipeline in the next 2 to 3 months. So all of that for me says, yes, on the one hand, definitely challenges, particularly in the Midwest, given all of the macro dynamics interacting with global financial issues. But at the same time, when I think about some of the key fundamental kind of drivers of housing, specifically at the local area, many of them on balance suggest a bit better here than maybe other parts of the country.
Thank you. So that facilitates my next question.
Yeah,
so you talked about how the affordability tends to be more of an issue on the coast, but we do see some struggles here, and we do in the Midwest here use that term affordable housing to think about, especially I of course work at NDSU, so I think about students and I think about their ability to enter the workforce as a new grad and find a place to live as a new grad, and so that ability to have affordable housing. So we know this is a focus nationwide and here in the Midwest. It's a workforce challenge. Can you talk a little bit about the current conditions related to that term, affordable housing, and what your thoughts are on if there's things that could help to remedy that situation?
Yeah, let me say that, particularly, one of the ways to think about housing is certainly, in terms of affordability. And that's an appropriate way to think about it. How much income do you have? What is the price of the home? What is the mortgage rate? You might even extend it to taxes and insurance and think about kind of what we call PITI more generally to start to get at affordability. But another way to think about housing is really to think about it as your life cycle. That is to think about, okay, I'm living with my parents. Ultimately, I move out, and hopefully, I'm able to find a home. Typically, your first home is going to be a rental. Ultimately, we hope that life events happen such that you then feel the confidence and the ability to then get into home ownership. Generally, you'll buy an existing home first, and then ultimately, move up to a more expensive, but hopefully your dream new home. So, for me, when I think about your question, that really kind of makes me focus on kind of housing as part of that life cycle, and then what are the challenges with affordability kind of right there. So, a couple things. The first one is certainly we have seen challenges first of all, with respect to incomes. In part, fueled by student loan debt that might be taking on. Research does suggest that student loan debt does delay ultimately your ability to get into home ownership. But at the same time, Matt had a terrific chart showing how the higher cost of living winds up eroding the purchasing power of your income. And that's also going to be critical, but it's hitting up against the challenges that builders are facing in terms of being able to bring affordable rental housing to market, such that what we are really observing is a large share of renter households that are what we call cost burdened. That is 30% of their income goes to their rent in a given year. Even a large percentage that are severely cost burdened, where 50% of their income may go to rent. And ultimately, what we're also seeing is increases in people who are then moving back in with their parents. So all of that, I think, is really that affordability challenge with respect to housing is interacting particularly with a group that's at the beginning stages of their earnings life cycle in ways that may make it more challenging and ultimately delay their ability to progress across that life cycle, ultimately to home ownership.
Thank you. Look at all the things you're learning today. When we think about economic growth in the region and we think about businesses wanting to expand, we think about them wanting to hire workers, we think about where those workers are going to come from and whether they're going to move to town and if they're going to stay in town. One of the aspects that I promote when I talk about this area that I discovered when I moved here that I think is fantastic is that it is a fantastic place to start a business. So there is an entrepreneurial climate that allows starting of businesses here that is not necessarily the same in every state. So that leads me to our third panelist. So I'm going to ask Cody a little bit about first of all, sort of, she gave you a preview of what 50 South Capital does and what their plans are. If you were thinking of starting a business, if you were thinking of expanding, if you had a new idea, because we have a lot of those here in North Dakota, can you explain sort of how venture capital operates here in North Dakota and across the country, and maybe what industries are getting the most focus, perhaps in the Midwest? Because I could say some, but I don't have any information to back that up.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, I think nationally, if you were paying attention to venture, there was, the peak of the hype cycle was in 2021. There was a zero interest rate policy environment. People were writing checks for wild ideas. The valuations were sky high. That has resulted in a liquidity crunch now in 2024 because companies are staying private a lot longer. The IPO window has been closed for quite some time. The increase in interest rates have reduced the M&A activity, and so all of a sudden, companies are working to grow into those valuations, which means they're not exiting. And without exit, that means that LPs don't have liquidity to be able to then reinvest in subsequent funds. And so there certainly is a little bit of a, I would say, market correction going on in venture. I think 2024, there was 80% fewer first-time funds than there were in 2021, which means it's really hard to go raise a fund right now. Blue chip firms that people know those brands, they're taking up the majority of new LP capital. And so that macro environment means venture's getting a lot more disciplined. The focus continues to be on not just scale, and venture math is a little bit 1 + 1 has to equal 5 instead of 1 + 1 = 2. And so there's always been a focus on scale, but there's now, I would say, much more of a focus on your durability of your growth and your unit economics, and are you capital efficient, and how is the capital going to help you actually grow, instead of to some extent in 2021 where it was just writing checks at wild valuations just to get the money out of the funds. The supply to demand ratio of private capital to startups has flipped. So in 2021 there was more capital than there was demand for that kind of capital, and 2024 it ends the opposite way, and so expect that to certainly kind of be the case into 25. But I think more locally, North Dakota's private market is still fairly nascent, and so we haven't had crazy headlines. We used to be on the very bottom of the number of venture deals and the total volume in venture deals until the growth fund was activated in 2021, and so we're starting to see some very real movement on the number of deals being done. I firmly believe it's hard to be what you can't see, and so every time someone raises a round or gets on a stage or has a big meaningful win for customers, that's sending a signal to the market that you can build here. But in regards to industry specifically, 2024 nationally, AI deals took up 45% of venture capital. So it's not going anywhere. It's going to continue to be that way. And in North Dakota, there's AI all over our underlying portfolio. We've committed $89 million. That's gone into 5 funds and 4 direct co-investments. Our portfolio has invested over $150 million now into nearly 50 companies that have been impacted by the work. And it's everything from construction tech to UAS to long-standing manufacturers in this market, to a lot of ag tech and kind of everything in between. So, I think if you're an established business owner and you're part of that screen on thinking about generational transition, part of our portfolio construction is the underlying belief that North Dakota is not immune to that generational transition. We firmly believe that firms that are here are going to win those opportunities because a handshake still means something here. And, especially I live in Dickinson, so the further west you go, the more they're averse to anyone from New York City or, in a full-on suit. So, I think just knowing that there are firms that are sourcing here, firms with deep roots here, firms that share the conviction in North Dakota, many of whom are sitting down in the black building now with an office. And so for the transitional piece, that part's there. For the startup component, there has never been a better time to start a company in North Dakota than there is right now. And it is hard to encapsulate how much both policy, financial resources, but there is now a community that says, what can we do to help you? That is real and palpable and makes a very big difference for entrepreneurs. So if you're thinking about it, just do it and start. And if you're someone who's, just wants to be in the arena of supporting entrepreneurs, there's a lot of strategics in here. Become a customer. Think about, investing as a strategic partner. Invest in the funds that are trying to invest in the market so they can increase their LP base. Because I truly do believe, venture and private equity, but especially venture, you saw the slides, that technology is what's going to continue to increase our productivity. And if we can keep betting on our own here, we're going to be better off in the long run.
This is such an optimistic panel. I'm loving it. It's fantastic. Just a reminder, there's a QR code at your table, so if you would like to send some questions in, I can direct them to a specific panelist if you want, or we can throw them out to everybody if you want. So you can scan the QR code or go to chamberquestions.com. I'm going to throw one out for all 3 of you, so we'll see who wants to answer it first. Each of you has talked about a little bit about what you expect will happen in the coming year. So I'm going to just make you give that a little bit more of a finer point. So in the next 3 to 5 years, in your field, what do you think there will be the biggest trend or shift that business leaders here in this room need to be preparing for?
Yeah, I'll start off. I certainly want to pick up on the technology point. I think particularly with respect to supply of affordable housing, and that relates to, the challenge I think that the real estate sector has around productivity. We don't get a lot of labor productivity. In fact, over the last 20 to 30 years, it's basically been flat with some fluctuations around the broader economic cycle. What that suggests is either you need a whole lot more workers, but that it's already been articulated how those challenges at the macro level have important implications for the availability of labor in the real estate sector. But then it also starts to bring in, what can we do around factory-built housing? What can we do around, is there more that we can do around manufactured housing? Is there more that we can do around prefab? Is there more that we can do to try to in part reduce those costs, in part gain greater productivity around housing? That is certainly something that I think is somewhat nascent, at least when you look at the data. And that in part reflects the challenges with financing, among other challenges, but certainly one that I think is getting a lot more attention across a number of spaces. That's on the supply side, is what can we do, what can we do around technology to to increase housing. That's going to run into building codes. That's going to run into permit. I mean, it's going to interact with all of the different challenges that are at play. Maybe you need a little less wood, but at the same time, can you have a factory that allows you to build two permitting rules, two regulations across a number of different areas in order to drive scale. On the demand side, certainly I think it's around population. I mean, certainly, one of the kind of silver linings I think that we've seen is amidst the affordability challenge, particularly on the for sale side of the market, has been that millennials are still sizable, in part because their parents were sizable. And as they go through specific life events, jobs, larger families, et cetera, that does itself put pressure on you to buy a home. I always like to tell a story when it hit me personally when my wife was pregnant with our third kid, and this was in November, December of 2022. And we drove a Jetta then, and I loved my Jetta because we live in the city. That small car can get into every parking space. It's fully paid off. Why do I want to take out debt for a car? But a Jetta is not going to fit all of the 5 people that are now in my family. But at the same time, around December 2021. Chairman Powell gets up and says they got it wrong on inflation. And as someone with an economics background, it's okay, interest rates are going up. You don't wait, you have to buy. And so, in that case, certainly on the margins, affordability mattered to me. But given the fact that we were adding another kid, we needed that bigger car. And that's what we had to do. And subsequently, we wound up having high gas prices at the same time, so a double whammy there. But that really spoke to me about behaviorally that certainly affordability can matter, but as you also go through these certain life events, there is that need for more space, there is that need to make those purchases that will ultimately show up in the data. Now, why do I say all that? I say all of that because, next 5 to 10 years is where we really see that cliff around population. The charts were already shown. If you plot the population by age, you see that by the time younger Gen Z, Gen Alpha, you're talking about real population declines, even population declines to the point that will we start telling a news story around housing and whether or not we have enough housing or the type of housing for people. That will be something that's very interesting, but it's something that I think will be coming in the medium term that I think will ultimately be critical for the real estate sector.
Thank you. Julie, do you want to highlight what you think?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So, you talk about our optimism, and I think a big key to the optimistic tone here is the states that we're operating in. There's, Paul mentioned earlier, a lot of programs here to be supportive of businesses, and I'll just say that the EDC has what they call their Smart Book, and I don't think it includes everything, but it's a pretty exhaustive list of all of the economic incentives, tax incentives that are available to the region, in fact, the states, Minnesota, North Dakota, and some national programs as well. So I think there's good reason for optimism here. What is going to change over the next 3 to 5 years is technology. I don't know if there's a sector that would have a different number one. For banks, there's AI is putting us in a spot where we can give customers access to their data, very secure, very simple, and real time. It's going to be transformational for businesses and helping them make decisions. It's helping us make decisions. It's going to help us be more prudent at underwriting. It's going to help us be more prudent in managing our balance sheet. We think that people, and we're in a people business, we think people are still the core of what we do, but technology is going to have an impact and hopefully a positive one. I think, if we keep that people-centric mindset, technology will just only enhance it. When it comes to the kinds of growth we're seeing from businesses, the workforce is the workforce challenge is not going to get better with the number of people turning 65 per Matt every year. So absolutely financing for automation. And then if you look at some of the area programs, there is support. There's tech support. There's state funding. The Bank of North Dakota has some fantastic programs. There is support for automation. There's support for buying the machinery. There's support for training your staff. The 5% jobs that we don't even have a job title for today. You're going to need support. Businesses are going to need support, and how do we train the individuals to do these brand new jobs? So that's what I see for the future.
Thank you. So I'm not going to let you answer this question because I actually got someone to send in a question, and I'm so excited that someone actually sent a question in for you that I'm going to just short circuit. Well, you can answer both of them. So I'm giving you two, which is give us your forecast of what you think will happen in 3 to 5 years. But in addition to that, we heard from Matt that we expect that bond yields probably will remain high, that we're not probably going to change the amount of government borrowing that's happening. So with bond yields high, and when we think about the choice of those who have funds to either invest them in bonds or to invest them in different types of funds of which you manage, are you seeing any of that movement? Can you address if we expect bond yields to stay high, how that affects your ability for private equity or venture capital? And then do you see some people who are just choosing to wait and hold and be much more cautious rather than participate?
Yeah, I mean, so on the first thing about the predictions for the next 3 to 5 years, the only thing I would add beyond just AI continuing to consume a lot of the capital dollars is, Matt mentioned this, but the focus on national security and what that means now for venture capital. Historically, venture wasn't investing in national security because it takes a long time to do anything in deep tech and hard tech, and it doesn't fit some of the return profile. But the SBA's and the DoD's partnership, and now they're starting to license some SBIC funding to really focus around the 14 critical technologies around national defense and national security. You're starting to see funds across the market who are really saying, okay, what does AI do to help us get deep tech figured out faster and more efficiently? And that's everything from, I think Shannon mentioned this earlier, like sometimes we take for granted in North Dakota that we know where our food comes from, and food security is a national security issue. And so, we're really looking at how does ag tech play into that? Certainly cybersecurity, healthcare, bio. It's, national security is more than just like the weapons discussion. It's really around American dynamism, and I think we'll continue to see that focus in the next 3 to 5 years. On the question around, bond, I think broadly across 50 South, I mean, that's where there's so much interest in private credit right now because you can get the liquidity quicker, you still have an elevated return, and then there's activeness on the secondaries market where folks just want liquidity and the distribution that is not coming right now because of the exit window being so closed. So I think the fundraising market for firms in the next, 12 to 18 months is going to continue to be hard. If you've primarily raised from high net worths, there's a lot of conversations being had around cash and where does that money go and do you want it to be that liquid? If you're raising from institutions have had a little bit of an overallocation to venture because they haven't been able to get liquidity, and so there's that reset happening. But I think it ultimately comes down from at the fund level, it just comes down to your performance and how well are you able to source. Have you been able to have, either marked or, realizations that are real or just paper? But if they're paper, is there a story behind that? And I think in North Dakota, the state's just taken this big commitment to fostering a private market that can invest locally. And because of that, there's this, we're almost like the outlier to some of the national trends because there are more first-time funds. There are more funds looking at North Dakota. There is more stuff being built here as a result of that climate, on a per capita standpoint.
Perfect. Thank you. We're getting close to the end, so I'm going to ask each of our panelists. They have 1 minute Can you do this in 1 minute? I don't know that any of you can do this in 1 minute. Each of them has 1 minute to sort of give their final closing thoughts on our discussions today, and we'll be headed into our next part of the panel. So go ahead. I'll start with you, Julie.
Awesome, thank you. So in closing, I would say with the uncertainty that we seem to be facing today, the best thing we can do for our customers and our customers can do for us is to collectively control our destiny. So for our customers, make sure your capital structure is correct. We are advocates of carefully managed leverage. If your business aligns with that, make sure that you're protecting your liquidity. Make sure that you're communicating early and often with your bank. The world's going to throw us curveballs, and the best thing we can do is be ready for them. So,
thank you. Oh, perfect, Michael.
You know, I'll say two things. The first one is that the world's not going to stay like this forever. And, you know, to the point that you were making earlier, you know, those companies, we see it, especially coming out of the Great Recession, those businesses that were in the construction industry that were able to diversify away from construction, maybe toward home improvements, those that were able to partner with industry and with government were really the ones that were able to get through those trying times. So for me, it really is around, you know, how do you diversify? How do you remain connected to the broader ecosystem in a way that helps you to smooth out your experience over the ups and downs?
Yeah, the last thing I would say is just bullish on North Dakota, and the Midwest is on the rise. I mean, I think people realize that there are unbelievable communities to raise a family here. There's a community of support that looks different, and good deals come from good founders. And there's really good founders in North Dakota and across the Midwest. So optimistic about 2025 nationally, but really bullish on what can happen here.
Fantastic. Thank you, all three of you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for everyone who sent their questions in. We are delighted to have had a discussion today about investment. I think you heard some common themes from Matt's presentation and from our panelists today and from Rich's conversation this morning. We all are very bullish on the Midwest. We're all bullish on North Dakota and Minnesota and the things that are happening here. There are headwinds, no doubt, and I liked the way Matt put it where he said there are opportunities for error. And so perhaps we will be, reach out to your bankers, reach out to your venture capital friends, think about what the atmosphere feels like in your town so that we can address some of those housing concerns and recruit more people to the Midwest, to North Dakota specifically. So I appreciate all of your comments today. I appreciate the look at really the Midwest part in the context of the U.S. and what we expect to happen in the next few years or so. So please join me in thanking our panelists for their time today. And we're going to wrap up, and I believe that we'll have Shannon next. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the President and CEO of the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce, Shannon Full.
All right, we have wrapped up, so 3 hours in a pretty quick fashion. So I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for attending, those that watched online, to our partnering chambers. This is why we are able to do this in the level that we are. And then our sponsors, Cass County Electric, you're a phenomenal partner, have always been. Bremer Bank is such a great partner to work with, and we're so excited to welcome new friends and family of Old National Bank as you enter into our marketplace. We're really looking forward to that. I want to say we've got a couple things coming up. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our next summit, is the Midwest Agriculture Summit. We talked a lot about agriculture today and how important agriculture is to not just our economy, to the national economy, to the global economy, and what we're doing around food sustainability, food security as it relates to national security. So June 10th is that event. I'd also tell you that the reason we are successful is because of the engagement that all of you have with us. I would highly, highly encourage you to consider joining us on our DC fly-in this year. We're taking a group of business leaders and community leaders May 19th through the 21st to Washington, D.C. We have new partners joining us from other parts of North Dakota and Minnesota. There will be briefings by all of our key agency leaders, which we've got some really good agency leaders positioned in the Midwest in the administration right now. And so we have an opportunity to access them. We'll meet with all of our congressional delegates. We'll do some fun tours and just being able to be together. I think this is what we talk about. Why is it that we have such great attendance at events like this? It's because people want that belonging. They want to be together. So join us in DC. I promise you it will be a really good time. I'm looking out there to some of you that have joined us in the past. I know it's on your calendars already, but May 19th through the 21st. Once again, we just really thank you for all of your engagement and participation. My team, I want to thank my team. They are so many of their duties not assigned or things that they focus on. They served you your breakfast this morning. So to the team that puts together this, the content, the agenda, the logistics, I couldn't work with better people. So I wish you all the best today. We look forward to seeing you again really soon in the future. Have a great day.